Hey Monica, I'm back in my chair. It's one of those days. Summer's busy. Just gonna get this video done. I was thinking a lot about our conversation we had earlier this week and the story I was sharing with you about that road trip I had with the other woman where she was a driver and I was a navigator. And I was telling you all about how she was in control of the car and I was supporting her by being the best navigator and knowing all the things that she needed to know, what turns to take and that sort of thing. And then it was really, really surprising when you said if you were in that position, you would think that actually the support was going the other way, that she was supporting you and that you were managing the driver with your navigation skills. And that really made me think a lot about perspective and about ownership of power and really understanding when you're in charge and when you're not in charge and what it means to be in charge. Is the navigator in charge? Is the driver in charge? Is that they're equally in charge and there's just a collaborative element between the two of them? And it also had me wondering why I chose to think of myself in a support role when, with a simple secondary consideration, I was realizing I was actually in a much more powerful controlling role than the driver was. I knew what was going on. I was dictating all of the turns. I knew the route we were taking. She was just, almost like a cog in the machine that I was imagining rather than I was the advisor in to the person who was running the show. Either way, it's really interesting to think about how perspective can really change the way we see ourselves and others and reality. And I actually have already seen half of that video that you were telling about Netflix, Heal, I think the name of it is. And Dr. Lipton is one of the key people on there, and I always found him really fascinating. He has a lot of YouTube videos. But he was talking about how our anxiety or our flight or flight system is programmed to be responsive to the reality we're in, that we're programmed to respond to threats in reality. Well, that's all fine and good until you realize that reality is mostly a perception, it's mostly an interpretation. So you can interpret a situation as threatening even when it's not, and then your body would jump into fight or flight, and that ends up making you feel stress that is not actually best for you. So the example in that Netflix show was that, we're built to run away from, saber-toothed tigers and bears and lions. And that's a completely appropriate response. You want all of the energy in your system to go to running. So you're going to have a very anxious reaction and very the shutdown of the cerebral cortex and everything put into reactionary mode because in the moment reactions and instincts are going to be the most likely to keep you alive at that point. But in modern day society, we have very few situations where our instincts and being reactionary is going to keep us alive versus letting us be dead or killing us. It's more likely that those responses are going to shut down our prefrontal cortex and keep us from thinking things through clearly. And with disagreement with someone or a situation that goes south, we have actually plenty of time to think of it. We don't have to have split-second decisions because we're not really in danger like our interpretation of reality is. And we end up having chronic stress, which has lots of effects on the body that we're not actually intended to have. I mean, we're not meant to be stressed and in fight or flight all the time. And yet we are because of the way we interpret reality. So I was just wondering, what are some ways that you've realized that you have power over the interpretation of your reality, whether it's seeing the navigator as a support or a leadership role, or whether it is choosing what to be anxious about and turning off that and re-engaging your prefrontal cortex. I'll talk to you next week.